We thought it was done. Just when we thought enough records were broken for the day. Not only does USA get record-breaking viewership and ratings, CBS, come on down. We're gonna break some records for you and raise your viewership ratings as well as only the GOAT, Caitlyn Clark, can do. CBS receiving their highest rated WNBA game throughout the entire.
There are moments in sports that stop everything cold. Moments where one decision, one quiet, calculated no, sends shockwaves through an entire industry and forces every executive, every broadcaster, and every sponsor to suddenly reckon with the reality they spent months refusing to acknowledge. What just happened with Caitlyn Clark and the WNBA All-Star Three-Point Contest is exactly one of those moments, and the fallout is still spreading. Caitlyn didn't throw a punch. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't go on social media and air out her grievances for the world to see. She simply declined an invitation. And in doing so, she may have just triggered the single most embarrassing corporate meltdown in the history of women's professional basketball. Boardrooms went silent. Producers started sweating. Sponsors started firing off emergency emails, and the league that thought it could pencil in the biggest name in women's sports like she was just another checkbox on a marketing spreadsheet got the coldest, most brutal wake-up call imaginable. This isn't just a story about a three-point contest. This is a story about power. Who actually has it, who pretends to have it, and what happens when the person with all the real leverage finally decides she's done playing the game on someone else's terms. To understand why Clark's decision hit the way it did, you have to go back to the moment the WNBA announced the participants for the 2026 All-Star Three-Point Contest. When that list went public, the reaction across social media was immediate, and it wasn't good for the league. The names announced were Ryan Howard, Marina Mabrey, Aja Wilson's girlfriend Paige Bucker's partner AZ Fudd, Bridget Carlton, Natisha Heidemann, and Janelle Salone. Now, read that list again. Take your time, because if you follow the WNBA even casually, your eyebrows probably just went up. There is not a single name on that list that moves the needle for casual sports fans tuning in for All-Star Weekend. The commentary from fans online was instant and brutal. Who became the running joke across every platform within hours of the announcement going live. But here's where things get genuinely infuriating. While that underwhelming lineup was being assembled, Sophie Cunningham, a player who ranks among the league's most prolific and efficient three-point shooters by percentage, didn't even receive an invitation. Let that sink in. A player who has been lighting up the floor with high-volume, high-accuracy shooting from deep. A player with a genuine fan base that is loud and passionate and very online was completely bypassed. No invite, no consideration, nothing. The WNBA didn't just make a questionable selection, they made a selection that felt tone-deaf to the point of being almost intentionally provocative, and fans noticed immediately. Here's the part that turned a bad situation into a full-blown catastrophe for the league. According to reports that broke the story, Caitlyn Clark, Sabrina Ionescu, and Kayla McBride were all reportedly invited to the contest, and all three declined. When you lose three of your most recognizable names before the event even starts, you don't have an all-star showcase anymore. You have a problem. But the name that matters most in this conversation, the name that made executives' phones start buzzing the second word got out, was Clark's. Because here's the thing about Caitlyn Clark. She is not just a good player in a league full of good players. She is the reason millions of people who had never previously watched a WNBA game in their lives are now setting reminders on their phones for Indiana Fever tip-offs. She is the reason network deals got renegotiated. She is the reason the conversation around women's basketball changed completely, almost overnight. Her presence in a broadcast doesn't just add viewers, it multiplies them in ways the league has never seen before. So when she said no to the three-point contest, she didn't just skip an event, she took the audience with her. You want to understand just how massive Clark's impact really is? Look at the numbers, because they don't lie and they don't care about anyone's feelings. Viewership for WNBA games featuring Caitlyn Clark surged by 172% compared to the previous season's cable average. Not 20%, not 50%, 172%. When analysts started pulling the data on the most watched games of the entire season, the pattern was undeniable. The top 4 or 5 viewed games all had one thing in common. Caitlyn Clark was on the court every single time.
Led up to this, Indiana Fever players have not been getting the right calls. Players been getting, might as well say, assaulted on a basketball court, and different various things has been happening. So if you guys have not heard the news, the WNBA made an announcement that the three-point contest, and they listed several people that will be taking part in the three-point contest. And with that being said, Caitlyn Clark has declined to take part in it. Now, some people mad.
She became the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 200 points from three-point range. She put up 45 points and 10 assists in a single game against Seattle, a performance that had never been done in the league's history. She was named Eastern Conference Player of the Week as a direct result. These aren't marketing numbers. These aren't inflated social media metrics. These are hard broadcast numbers, historic stat lines, and verified ratings data that tell an unambiguous story. The league's sudden surge in popularity wasn't evenly distributed. It wasn't a rising tide lifting all boats. It was one player playing at a generational level, dragging the entire sport's visibility upward almost entirely on her own shoulders. And for months, certain voices in sports media tried to argue otherwise, tried to spread the credit around, tried to say the growth belonged to the league as a whole, tried to avoid giving any single player too much of the narrative. Those voices are very quiet right now. Because the moment Clark opted out of the three-point contest, the experiment ran itself. The control group just activated, and the results are exactly what anyone paying honest attention already knew they would be. Behind the scenes, the fallout was immediate and it was ugly. Major television networks had already gone through the process of selling premium advertising slots for All-Star Weekend under one very specific assumption, that Caitlyn Clark would be participating and that her presence would drive viewership numbers into record territory. That was the pitch to advertisers. That was the foundation the entire broadcast strategy was built on. Multi-million-dollar commitments were made based on that assumption. And then she said no. The moment word leaked that Clark was out, the financial math on those broadcast deals started falling apart in real time. Ticket resale markets, which had been moving at a healthy clip in anticipation of the weekend, took an immediate and visible hit. The demand dropped so fast and so sharply that it became its own news story, a live public demonstration of exactly how much of the event's draw was tied to one person's participation. Corporate sponsors who had been excited about the All-Star platform started firing off emergency messages to their media buyers. The question being asked in those conversations was not subtle. Without Clark, what exactly are we paying for here? Executive producers found themselves in the uncomfortable position of trying to rebuild their entire programming pitch around an event that had just lost the one element that made it genuinely sellable to a mainstream audience. This is the part that tends to get glossed over in the social media conversation, which tends to focus on the drama and the optics. But the financial mechanics here matter enormously because they reveal something that the league has been desperately trying to avoid confronting directly. Caitlyn Clark is not just the face of the WNBA. She is, at this particular moment in time, a significant portion of its economic engine. And the league's administrative decisions have been operating as though that reality doesn't exist. Let's come back to Sophie Cunningham for a second, because her exclusion from the invite list is not just a footnote to this story. It's actually one of the most revealing details in the entire controversy. Cunningham has been one of the most talked about players in the league among fans who actually watch games closely. Her shooting volume, her accuracy from three, and her unapologetically aggressive style of play have built her a fan base that is vocal, engaged, and growing. Fans were not quietly okay with her being left off the invite list. They were loud about it, and they were right to be. When you run a three-point contest and you don't invite one of the players who legitimately belongs in a three-point contest by every measurable shooting metric, you've made a decision that isn't about basketball, it's about something else. And fans are smart enough to recognize that immediately, even if they can't always articulate exactly what that something else is. What made it worse was the contrast. The players who were invited, while all legitimate professionals, did not carry the public profile or the shooting credentials to justify the exclusion of someone like Cunningham. The selection process looked less like a merit-based competition and more like an internal administrative exercise that happened to attach the word contest to it. Clark reportedly saw this, and people close to the situation have suggested that the Cunningham snub was very much part of the calculus behind Clark's decision to decline. Whether you call it solidarity, protest, or just a refusal to be used as a promotional prop while the league ignores her peers, the message landed clearly. You don't get the star power without the respect. That's not how this works anymore. What happened on social media after Clark's decline became public wasn't just a negative reaction. It was organized, it was loud, and it was sustained in a way that clearly rattled people inside the league. Boycott campaigns launched across every major platform almost simultaneously. Fans pledged publicly to turn off their televisions during the three-point contest broadcast. Official WNBA accounts were flooded with millions of comments, the overwhelming majority of them expressing frustration, anger, and disappointment at the league's handling of the entire situation. Fan-made videos documenting the timeline of events, the questionable invite list, Cunningham's exclusion, Clark's decline, the broadcast panic, racked up view counts that completely overshadowed anything the league's own promotional content was generating. This is the part that the league's front office probably didn't anticipate at the scale it actually arrived. Individual player controversies generate social media noise all the time in professional sports. That's just modern reality. But what happened here felt different in character. It felt less like a reactionary outburst and more like a coordinated expression of a fan base that had been building frustration for a while and finally found a focal point to direct it toward. The message from millions of viewers was clear, and it was not ambiguous. Sports fans are not interested in watching corporate gatekeepers exploit superstar talent while making decisions that feel arbitrary, political, and disconnected from actual merit. If the league can't demonstrate that its events are built on genuine respect for the game and the players who play it at the highest level, the audience has options, and they're willing to use them. Mainstream sports anchors who would normally default to defending front office decisions found themselves sitting live on air trying to explain a situation that didn't have a good defense. Some of them acknowledged plainly that the event had become an embarrassment. That's not a small thing. These are people who make careers out of carefully calibrated takes, and even they couldn't construct a narrative that made the league look competent here. Here is what this moment is really about, underneath all the headlines and the social media noise and the broadcast panic. For decades, the traditional structure of professional sports leagues operated on a simple and largely unquestioned premise. The league holds the leverage. The league decides who gets the spotlight, who gets the promotional push, who gets the prime time slot, and who stays in the background. Players, regardless of their individual talent or drawing power, were largely expected to participate in whatever the league organized, show up where they were told to show up, and be grateful for the platform. That model is breaking down, and Caitlyn Clark's decision is one of the clearest examples yet of just how completely it's breaking down in real time. In the modern media landscape, star power is not something a league can manufacture and distribute through institutional channels. It is built directly between an individual athlete and their audience, through performance, through personality, through authentic connection. Clark's fan base didn't emerge because the WNBA ran a smart marketing campaign positioning her as a must-watch player. It emerged because she is genuinely must-watch, because people tuned in and couldn't look away, and because that feeling spread organically across millions of individual viewing experiences. That kind of connection between a player and an audience is not transferable. The league cannot take Clark's audience and redirect it toward an event she's not participating in. It doesn't work that way. The audience follows the player, not the logo. And the league is learning that lesson in the public, with every broadcast metric and ticket resale number available for anyone to look at. The players who actually draw the crowds are beginning to understand, collectively and with increasing clarity, that they hold real leverage, not theoretical leverage, real economic, undeniable leverage that shows up directly in television ratings and sponsor valuations and ticket demand. And when players understand that leverage exists, and when they see examples of it being exercised successfully, the dynamic between athletes and league administration shifts in ways that are very difficult to reverse. The WNBA front office cannot walk this back. The numbers are public, the timeline is documented, the fan response is on record. Whatever internal conversations are happening right now about how to manage the fallout, they're happening against a backdrop of irrefutable evidence that the league's approach to talent management and event curation created this situation entirely on its own. Moving forward, the league faces a choice that it probably wishes it didn't have to make so publicly and so urgently. It can continue operating under the assumption that institutional authority is enough to compel its biggest stars to participate in events, regardless of how those events are assembled. Or it can genuinely reckon with the reality that the era of compliance by default from marquee players is over. Clark doesn't need the league's platform to maintain her relevance or her connection to her audience. She has demonstrated that clearly. What the league needs is for her to keep choosing to show up, to keep choosing to participate, to keep choosing to give the WNBA brand the association with her name and her performance. And that kind of voluntary participation requires that the league treat her and her peers with a level of respect and merit-based fairness that has clearly been absent from recent administrative decisions. Sophie Cunningham deserved an invite to a three-point contest. That's not a complicated argument. It's not a partisan take. It's just an honest assessment of her credentials as a shooter in a shooting contest. The fact that she didn't get one, and that the league apparently thought nobody would notice or care, tells you something important about the disconnect between the people making decisions in the front office and the people actually watching the games. There's a version of this story where Caitlyn Clark participates in the three-point contest, puts on a show, helps the league generate ratings, and everyone goes home satisfied. That version of the story is what the WNBA was counting on. That's what the corporate machine was built around. Clark shows up, Clark performs, Clark carries the broadcast, and the league takes credit for a successful All-Star weekend. But Clark is apparently done being the solution to problems she didn't create, done being the promotional lifeline for an institution that hasn't consistently shown her peers the respect they deserve, done lending her audience and her name to an event that was put together without the kind of merit-based integrity that the contest's name implies. And the reaction from fans suggests that millions of people who have been watching closely understand exactly what she's doing and why. The silent protest framing that's been circulating online captures something real about the nature of the move. She didn't need to say anything. She didn't need to explain herself or criticize the league publicly or put any specific grievance on the record. The action spoke with complete clarity on its own. The queen doesn't need the crown you're offering if the crown comes with conditions she hasn't agreed to. And right now, Caitlyn Clark is making it very clear that she's operating on her own terms, and the WNBA is going to have to decide whether it wants to build something that deserves her participation or keep finding out what it costs when she walks the other way. The fallout from this moment will ripple through the league for a long time. The sponsors know what happened, the networks know what happened, the players know what happened, and the fans, the millions of fans who showed up in those 172% viewership numbers and are now boycotting a broadcast, they definitely know what happened. The question now is whether the people running the WNBA are finally willing to honestly reckon with what those numbers have been telling them all along.